The day started like any other for Dr. Adam. His dental clinic was busy as usual, filled with the familiar sounds of buzzing tools and soft conversations between patients and staff. He had seen all kinds of cases throughout his career, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen. The door creaked open, and a woman stepped inside. She moved cautiously, as if she didn't want to be noticed. Her clothes were old and worn, her shoulders slightly hunched. But it wasn't her appearance that caught Dr. Adam's attention, it was her eyes. They were filled with something he had only seen a handful of times in his life. Fear. She approached the reception desk, her voice barely above a whisper as she gave her name. The receptionist nodded and motioned for her to sit in the waiting area. Dr. Adam observed her for a moment before calling her in. She hesitated before finally standing up and making her way toward his chair. When she sat down, he gave her a warm smile, trying to put her at ease. "How can I help you today?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a slow breath, then opened her mouth. Dr. Adam's own breath caught in his throat. She had no teeth. Not a single one. His mind raced. This wasn't normal. Teeth don't just disappear overnight. There were no signs of decay, no indication of disease. This wasn't natural. Her gums were swollen and scarred, as if they had been forcefully stripped of every tooth. He tried to remain calm. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked gently. The woman flinched, lowering her gaze. She clasped her hands together, her fingers trembling. A long silence stretched between them. Dr. Adam knew that look. She was hiding something. Or worse, she was afraid of something. "If someone hurt you," he said softly, "I can help." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. "No," she whispered. "I just need pain medication." Something about the way she said it made his stomach tighten. She wasn't just in physical pain, she was scared. Of what? He didn't know. "Are you sure?" he pressed. "You don't have to go through this alone." But she shook her head, stood up quickly, and reached for the prescription slip he had just written. "Thank you," she murmured before hurrying toward the door. Dr. Adam watched her leave, an uneasy feeling creeping over him. His instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Very wrong. He glanced at the clock. It was late, but he couldn't let this go. He had to find out what had happened to her. And so, against his better judgment, he decided to follow her. At the same time, in another part of town, a completely unrelated event was taking place, or at least, that's how it seemed. Mark, a 17-year-old black teenager, sat on a crowded city bus, his backpack slung over his shoulder. It had been a long day, and he was exhausted. But as the bus rolled to a stop, his eyes landed on a pregnant white woman standing near the front. She looked tired, shifting uncomfortably as she tried to balance herself with one hand on the rail. Without hesitation, Mark stood up. "Here, you should sit." The woman looked at him, her expression unreadable at first. Then, a small smile touched her lips. "Thank you," she said, carefully lowering herself into the seat. Mark didn't think much of it. To him, it was just basic human kindness, something his mother had always taught him. But as the bus neared its final stop, the woman reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. When she stood up, she turned to Mark and placed it in his hand. "This is for you," she said softly. Then, without another word, she stepped off the bus and disappeared into the busy street. Mark frowned and unfolded the note. As his eyes scanned the words, his heart began to pound. His fingers tightened around the paper. This wasn't just a thank you note. It was something else entirely. Two strangers. Two seemingly unrelated events. But in ways no one could have predicted, these two moments were about to collide, leading to a revelation so shocking that it would change everything. Mark's hands trembled as he stared at the note. The words were hastily written, the ink slightly smudged, as if the woman had been in a hurry when she wrote it. His heart pounded in his chest. Why would a stranger hand him something so cryptic? He glanced around the bus, half expecting someone to be watching him, but no one seemed to care. People were lost in their own worlds, staring at their phones or gazing out the window. His mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was nothing, just a random message from a grateful stranger. But something in his gut told him that wasn't the case. The way she looked at him before handing over the note, the urgency in her voice, it didn't feel normal. He folded the paper and shoved it into his pocket, deciding he'd figure it out later. Right now, he just needed to get home. Meanwhile, Dr. Adam followed the woman at a safe distance, his pulse quickening with each step. She walked quickly, glancing over her shoulder every now and then as if she expected someone to be following her. She wasn't heading toward a bus stop or a taxi stand, she was walking through the dimly lit streets, past closed shops and silent alleyways. The deeper she went, the more uneasy he felt. She finally turned onto a narrow side street and disappeared behind an old building. Dr. Adam hesitated for a moment before stepping closer. The building looked abandoned, its windows dark, its walls covered in grime. He crept forward carefully, peering around the corner. The woman was standing near a rusted metal door, fumbling with a set of keys. His mind raced. Should he approach her? Should he ask her what was going on? Before he could decide, the door creaked open, and she slipped inside, shutting it quickly behind her. Dr. Adam stood frozen. Every instinct told him to walk away, to forget what he had seen, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this woman was in serious trouble. He took a deep breath, gathered his courage, and stepped forward. Mark reached home and tossed his backpack onto the couch, but his mind was still stuck on the note. He pulled it out of his pocket, his eyes scanning the words again. There was no name, no explanation, just a simple sentence that made his stomach tighten. Don't trust them. They're watching. His pulse quickened. Who was watching? And who was them? He thought about the woman again, about the way she had looked at him before leaving. Was she in danger? Was he in danger? He pulled out his phone, debating whether to text his best friend about it, but he hesitated. It sounded crazy. What was he supposed to say? Hey, a random pregnant lady gave me a creepy note. What should I do? No. He needed to think. He folded the note again and stuffed it into his drawer. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe he was overthinking it. But something inside him whispered that this was just the beginning. Dr. Adam pressed his ear against the rusted metal door, straining to hear what was happening inside. He couldn't make out any words, but he could hear faint voices, low, hushed, and hurried. He swallowed hard. Who was she talking to? Was she safe? He thought about knocking, but before he could, something made his blood run cold. A muffled cry. Not loud. Not a scream. But a sound of pain. His breath caught in his throat. Every fiber of his being told him to leave, to walk away before he got himself into something he couldn't handle. But he couldn't ignore what he had just heard. He reached into his pocket, gripping his phone. He could call the police. But what would he even say? He had no proof that anything illegal was happening. Just a gut feeling. Just a terrified woman with missing teeth and a bad feeling in his chest. Before he could decide, the door suddenly creaked open again. Dr. Adam barely had time to react before he ducked behind a nearby dumpster. A tall figure stepped out, their face hidden under a hood. They glanced around cautiously before locking the door behind them and walking off into the night. Dr. Adam's heart pounded. He stayed hidden until the figure was out of sight, then crept toward the door. He had to know what was happening inside. Slowly, carefully, he reached for the handle. It was locked. He let out a frustrated breath, stepping back. He needed another way in. Just as he was about to check around the side of the building, he heard footsteps. He spun around, expecting to see the hooded figure returning, but instead, he saw something worse. The woman. She was staring at him through a crack in the window, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. She mouthed something, but he couldn't hear her. She tried again, her lips forming words he couldn't quite make out. Then she did something that sent chills down his spine. She raised her hand, her fingers shaking, and pointed behind him. Dr. Adam's breath caught in his throat. He turned slowly, dreading what he was about to see. But there was nothing there. Just the empty street, dimly lit by flickering streetlights. He turned back to the window, but the woman was gone. Mark sat on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying the moment on the bus, the way the woman had handed him the note. Something about it didn't sit right with him. Finally, he sat up and reached for his phone. Maybe he was being paranoid, but he needed to know more. He opened his search engine and typed in the words, "pregnant woman missing," just to see if anything unusual popped up. He scrolled through the results, not expecting much, but then something caught his eye. A news article. A recent one. Local woman, 7 months pregnant, reported missing by family. Last seen near downtown. Mark's stomach twisted. He clicked on the article and his heart nearly stopped when he saw the photo. It was her. The woman from the bus. His hands grew clammy as he read further. She had been missing for 3 days. Her family was desperate to find her. They had no idea where she had gone. Mark's mind spun. If she was missing, then why was she on the bus earlier today? And why had she given him that note? A chill ran down his spine as a realization hit him. Maybe she wasn't running away. Maybe she was hiding. Dr. Adam knew he had seen fear before, but never like this. That woman wasn't just scared, she was terrified. And now, she was gone. He needed answers. He needed to know what she had been trying to warn him about. And somewhere across the city, Mark was thinking the same thing. Neither of them knew it yet, but their paths were about to cross in a way that would change both their lives forever. Mark's fingers hovered over his phone screen, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind raced through every possible explanation, but none of them made sense. The woman from the bus, she was missing. Reported missing by her own family. And yet, he had seen her just hours ago, sitting right in front of him, looking exhausted and wary. She had given him that note, almost like she knew something was coming. A shiver ran down his spine. He needed to do something. But what? Call the police. Tell them a missing woman had just casually ridden the bus and handed him a cryptic note? They'd probably think he was making it up. Maybe he should just forget about it, pretend it never happened. But then he thought about her eyes, how they had held a silent plea, a desperate kind of urgency. Mark took a deep breath and did the only thing that made sense. He grabbed his backpack, shoved the note into his pocket, and slipped out of his house. The city streets were quieter than usual, the hum of late-night traffic distant but ever-present. He pulled his hood up and walked toward the bus stop, his thoughts racing. He had no real plan, just an instinct telling him that something was very, very wrong. Across the city, Dr. Adam stood outside the abandoned building, his mind in turmoil. The woman had vanished from the window, leaving behind only a cold, unsettling silence. The memory of her expression, pure terror, refused to leave his mind. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing down the empty street. He had always believed in logic, in facts. But right now, all he had was a gnawing sense of dread and a locked door standing between him and the truth. Then, movement. A flicker of light from inside the building. It was faint, barely noticeable, but it was there. Someone was still inside. Dr. Adam pressed himself against the wall, debating his next move. He needed to know what was going on. He glanced around, looking for another way in. A side alley led him to a window, its glass cracked but intact. He pressed his palms against it, peering inside. The room beyond was dimly lit by a single bulb swinging from the ceiling. He could make out the outlines of old, rusted furniture, stacks of wooden crates, and a door at the far end that was slightly ajar. And then, movement. A shadow passed by the doorway, disappearing deeper into the building. His pulse quickened. Someone else was inside. Back on the other side of the city, Mark stepped onto the bus, his eyes scanning the nearly empty seats. The driver gave him a nod, not paying much attention. Mark slid into the seat where the woman had sat earlier, replaying the moment in his head. She had been holding her stomach protectively, her breathing uneven. At first, he had assumed it was just exhaustion, maybe stress. But what if it was something else? What if she was running from something? His fingers traced the edges of the note in his pocket. Don't trust them. They're watching. Who was watching? And why did she trust him enough to warn him? The bus rumbled forward, passing darkened storefronts and empty sidewalks. Mark stared out the window, lost in thought. He needed answers. But where would he even start? Then, as if on cue, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, frowning at the unknown number flashing across the screen. He hesitated. Then, curiosity won over, and he answered. "Hello." A pause. Then a shaky, whispering voice. "You have to listen to me." Mark's grip tightened around his phone. "Who is this? You need to leave it alone. Don't look for me. Don't ask questions. Just forget you ever saw me." His stomach dropped. It was her. "Wait," he said quickly. "I can help. Just tell me what's going on." "You can't help," she whispered. "They already know. You shouldn't have taken the note." Mark's breath caught in his throat. "Who's they?" Silence. Then, "I'm sorry." The line went dead. Mark sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, his heart hammering. This wasn't just some strange coincidence. He was in the middle of something big. Something dangerous. And now, he had a feeling that there was no turning back. Dr. Adam slowly pushed the window open, wincing as it creaked. He hoisted himself up, slipping inside as quietly as he could. His shoes hit the dusty floor, and he crouched low, listening for any movement. The building smelled of damp wood and something metallic, something that made his stomach churn. He moved carefully, his footsteps light, as he approached the doorway where he had seen the shadow. Then, a sound. A soft whimper. He froze. The sound was faint, but it was coming from somewhere deeper inside. He followed it, his pulse racing, stepping past broken furniture and discarded scraps of cloth. The whimpering grew louder. And then, he saw her. The woman from his clinic. She was sitting on the floor, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her body trembling. Her lips were parted, whispering something he couldn't quite hear. She didn't even notice him at first, her eyes were fixed on the floor, as if she was trapped in some kind of nightmare. "Hey," Dr. Adam said softly, stepping closer. "It's me. You're safe now." She looked up, and for a brief moment, he saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Then, just as quickly, she shook her head violently. "No," she whispered. "You shouldn't be here." "I had to find you," he said gently. "I need to know what happened to you. Why are you hiding?" Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "They took them. They took them." Dr. Adam frowned. "Who? Who took what?" She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, something outside made them both freeze. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, getting closer. Dr. Adam's breath caught in his throat. The woman's entire body tensed, her face drained of color. "They found me," she whispered. And before Dr. Adam could react, she grabbed his wrist, her grip like iron. "You need to run." Mark's grip tightened on his phone as he stared at the blank screen. His heart was pounding so hard that he could feel it in his throat. The woman had warned him, told him to forget everything, to walk away. But how could he? Every instinct inside him screamed that something was horribly wrong. He had never been the type to get involved in other people's business, but this wasn't just a random stranger anymore. He had seen the fear in her eyes, heard the desperation in her voice. She needed help, and even if she wouldn't admit it, he wasn't going to just walk away. The bus slowed to a stop, and Mark barely noticed as a few passengers got off. His mind was racing. If she had managed to call him, that meant she was still out there, still running from whoever was after her. But for how long? And who were they? Before he could figure out his next move, a strange sensation crept over him. The feeling of being watched. His eyes darted toward the bus driver, but the man was focused on the road ahead. The only other passenger sat near the back, scrolling through their phone. Mark swallowed hard, trying to shake the unease. Maybe he was just being paranoid. But as the bus turned a corner, he caught something in the reflection of the window, something that made his blood run cold. A black car. Following closely behind. Mark's breath hitched. He turned his head slightly, trying to get a better look without making it obvious. The car's headlights glowed eerily in the night, its tinted windows concealing whoever was inside. It stayed at a steady pace, keeping just enough distance to avoid suspicion. But it wasn't a coincidence. He knew it wasn't. His fingers curled around the edge of his seat as panic set in. Was this because of the woman? Because of the note? He didn't know how they had found him, But one thing was clear, they had. Across the city, Dr. Adam barely had time to react before the woman yanked him to his feet. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone who looked so frail. He could feel the tremor in her fingers, but her urgency overpowered everything else. "You have to go," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If they find you here, they won't let you leave." Dr. Adam's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't move. "I can't just leave you here," he said, keeping his voice low. "Tell me who they are. Tell me what's going on." The woman's eyes darted toward the door, the footsteps growing louder. She shook her head, her breathing uneven. "There's no time," she whispered. "If they see you, they'll think you know too much." A metallic click echoed through the silent room. The sound of a lock turning. Dr. Adam stiffened. The woman's entire body went rigid, and for the first time, real terror flashed across her face. "They're here." The doorknob twisted, and the door began to creak open. Dr. Adam didn't think, he acted. Grabbing the woman's hand, he pulled her toward the nearest hiding spot, an old, wooden cabinet shoved against the wall. It was barely big enough for the both of them, but they managed to squeeze inside just as the door swung open. Through the narrow gap in the wood, Dr. Adam could see a pair of heavy boots stepping into the room. The person moved slowly, deliberately, as if searching for something. Or someone. The woman's breathing was shallow, her hand clutching his so tightly that it hurt. Dr. Adam could hear his own heartbeat, loud and frantic in his ears. A second set of footsteps entered. A deep, gravelly voice broke the silence. "She was here," the man muttered. "She couldn't have gotten far." Dr. Adam held his breath. Another voice, sharper and colder, responded. "Search every room. If she's still here, we will find her." Mark's eyes stayed fixed on the black car as the bus came to another stop. He had a choice. He could stay on the bus, pretend he hadn't noticed, and hope that whoever was following him would eventually give up. Or he could take a risk. The bus doors hissed open. Without giving himself time to second guess, Mark shot up from his seat and stepped off onto the sidewalk. The moment his feet hit the pavement, he felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on him. He resisted the urge to turn around, to check if the car had stopped too. Instead, he kept walking, forcing himself to stay calm. 1 block. 2 blocks. The city was quiet at this hour, the usual crowds long gone. Then, he heard it. The low hum of an engine. Moving slowly. Following. His pulse spiked, but he didn't break stride. He needed to get somewhere public, somewhere he wouldn't be alone. But before he could make a plan, a sudden beep cut through the silence. Mark's phone. A new message. He pulled it out with shaky hands. The sender was another unknown number. "Stop now. This is your final warning." A chill ran down his spine. His eyes flicked to his surroundings, searching for cameras, people, anything that could tell him where the message had come from. But there was nothing. Just empty streets and the silent car creeping behind him. He was running out of time. Inside the abandoned building, Dr. Adam and the woman remained frozen as the footsteps moved closer. The first man's voice came again, frustration creeping in. "If she's not here, she's with someone. Someone's helping her." The other man let out a low chuckle. "Then we find them both." The woman squeezed her eyes shut. Dr. Adam didn't dare move. The boots turned, the floor creaking beneath their weight. And then, silence. A moment passed. Then another. Had they left? Dr. Adam risked a glance through the crack in the cabinet door. He couldn't see them anymore, but that didn't mean they were gone. He turned his head slightly toward the woman, whispering so low it was barely audible. "Who are they?" She shook her head, eyes filled with something deeper than fear. "You don't want to know." A new sound shattered the silence. A phone vibrating. Dr. Adam's stomach dropped as he realized it was his. The buzzing filled the tiny space, impossibly loud. Outside, the footsteps stopped. And then, slow, deliberate movement. Coming straight toward them. Dr. Adam's heart pounded as the vibration of his phone echoed in the tight space of the cabinet. The woman's breath hitched, her grip on his arm tightening like a vice. Outside, the footsteps stopped abruptly. A heavy silence followed, thick with tension. Dr. Adam scrambled to silence his phone, his fingers fumbling against the screen. But it was too late. A deep, cold voice broke through the stillness. "Did you hear that?" Dr. Adam felt the woman trembling beside him. She barely moved, but he could sense the terror radiating from her. Another voice answered, this one laced with amusement. "Looks like our little mouse isn't alone after all." The cabinet door rattled violently. Dr. Adam barely had time to react before the doors were yanked open, and harsh hands dragged him and the woman out into the open. The light was blinding after being hidden in the dark, and for a moment, all he could make out were the rough faces of the two men standing before them. They weren't dressed like typical criminals, no masks, no weapons in sight. But their eyes held something far worse. A cold, calculated ruthlessness. The taller of the two men took a step forward, his lips curling into a smirk. Well, look what we have here." His gaze flicked toward Dr. Adam. "You should have stayed out of this document." Dr. Adam swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who are you? What do you want with her?" The man chuckled. "The better question is, what does she know?" He turned his gaze to the woman, his smirk fading into something darker. "And why is she so desperate to run?" The woman, still shaking, lifted her chin slightly. Despite the fear in her eyes, there was something else now, determination. "You know why," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I won't let you cover it up." The second man scoffed. "You don't have a choice." Before either of them could react, the first man pulled something from his pocket, a syringe. The liquid inside glistened under the dim light, and Dr. Adam felt his stomach drop. "Wait," he started, stepping in front of the woman instinctively. The man shook his head, almost as if he was disappointed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, document." Then, before Dr. Adam could move, the man lunged. Everything happened in a blur. The woman let out a choked gasp. Dr. Adam tried to push back, but he was no match for the man's strength. He felt the sharp sting of the needle as it plunged into his arm. A cold sensation spread through his veins almost instantly. His vision blurred. His limbs grew heavy. The last thing he saw before everything faded to black was the woman's face, her eyes filled with something that looked like regret. When Dr. Adam woke, he was no longer in the abandoned building. The harsh hum of fluorescent lights flickered above him. The air smelled sterile, artificial. His arms and legs felt heavy, as if he had been sedated. As his vision cleared, he realized he was lying in a hospital bed. No, not a hospital. Something was wrong. He tried to move, but his wrists were strapped to the bed. His heart pounded as panic set in. What had happened? Where was the woman? Where was he? The door to the room creaked open. A familiar figure stepped inside. The woman. But something was different now. The fear in her eyes was gone. Instead, she looked calm. Resigned. "You're awake," she said softly. Dr. Adam's throat was dry. He swallowed hard, his voice coming out hoarse. "Where am I?" She hesitated. "Someplace safe." His eyes darted around the room. The walls were plain. No windows. A security camera blinked in the corner. His pulse quickened. "This isn't a hospital, is it?" he asked. She shook her head. Dr. Adam exhaled sharply. "Who are you?" The woman sighed and pulled up a chair beside him. For the first time, she looked truly exhausted. "My name is Sarah," she said finally. "And I never meant for you to get involved in this." Dr. Adam clenched his jaw. "Then why did you come to me? Why all of this?" Sarah looked down at her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet. "Because I had no one else to turn to." A heavy silence filled the room. "You were going to tell me the truth before they found us," Dr. Adam said. "Tell me now." Sarah took a deep breath. When she lifted her gaze to meet his, there was no more hesitation. "They're not after me," she said. "They're after the truth. And they'll do anything to bury it." Dr. Adam's blood ran cold. "What truth?" Sarah's lips parted, but before she could answer, the door behind her clicked open again. A man in a crisp suit entered the room. His face was unreadable, but the authority in his presence was undeniable. "That's enough," the man said. His voice was firm. Final. Sarah's expression hardened, but she didn't argue. Dr. Adams' mind raced. He had walked into something much bigger than he ever could have imagined. And now, strapped to this bed, he realized something chilling. He might not be walking out of it. Dr. Adams' breath was unsteady as he stared at the man in the suit. The sterile room felt even smaller now, the walls closing in on him. He was still strapped to the bed, helpless. Sarah sat beside him, her shoulders tense as she turned to face the man. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice firm but quiet. The man didn't react. His cold eyes remained fixed on Dr. Adam, as if calculating his next move. Then, he finally spoke. "Dr. Adam made a mistake when he followed you. But mistakes can be corrected." A chill ran through Dr. Adam's spine. He had heard that kind of language before, usually in crime stories where people disappeared without a trace. But this wasn't fiction. This was real. And he was in the middle of it. "You can't just make me disappear," Dr. Adam said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "People will ask questions." The man in the suit tilted his head slightly, as if amused. "Will they?" Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "He doesn't deserve this." He didn't know what he was walking into. "You can't just." The man held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Sarah, your part in this is over. We gave you a chance to stay quiet, to stay safe. But you ran. And now, here we are." Dr. Adams' mind was spinning. His body still felt weak from whatever they had injected him with earlier, but his thoughts were clearing. He had to find a way out of this. "You think you can just keep this buried forever?" he asked, his voice edged with defiance. "People like you always think you have control. But secrets have a way of getting out." The man smirked. "Not if the people who know them are gone." A sickening silence filled the room. Sarah's jaw tightened. She glanced at Dr. Adam, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. Then, before anyone could react, she lunged. It happened in a flash. Sarah grabbed the four-stand next to the bed and swung it hard at the man in the suit. The metal rod slammed against his arm, making him stumble back with a sharp grunt. The brief distraction was all she needed. "Move," she shouted. Dr. Adam barely had time to register what was happening before she reached for the straps around his wrists. Her fingers fumbled, her breathing heavy. The man in the suit recovered quickly. He reached into his pocket, pulling out something small and metallic, a gun. Sarah cursed under her breath, still trying to free Dr. Adam's other hand. The man raised the weapon, his expression dark. "That was a mistake," he said. A loud crack rang through the air. Dr. Adam flinched, expecting pain. But it never came. Instead, the man in the suit staggered back, his grip on the gun loosening. Behind him, the door to the room swung open, and two uniformed officers rushed inside, weapons drawn. "Drop it," one of the officers barked. For the first time, real surprise flashed across the man's face. His fingers twitched, but he didn't move fast enough. The officers closed in, pinning him against the wall and forcing the gun from his hand. Sarah let out a shaky breath. Dr. Adams' wrist was finally free, and he pulled himself up, still dazed. His gaze darted to the officers. "How?" One of them, a woman with sharp eyes, nodded toward Sarah. "She called us before you were taken. Sent a location. We've been tracking the signal ever since." Dr. Adam turned to Sarah, stunned. She gave him a tired smile. "I knew they'd come for me. I just hoped I'd have enough time to get you out first." The officers dragged the man in the suit out of the room, his protests falling on deaf ears. The nightmare was over. In the following days, the truth finally came to light. The people Sarah had been running from were part of a powerful organization that had spent years covering up their crimes. She had been one of their victims, but unlike the others, she had managed to escape. And she had proof, records, files, things they had desperately wanted to keep hidden. Dr. Adams' involvement had put him in danger, but it had also helped bring the whole operation down. His clinic was temporarily closed while authorities investigated, but he didn't care. He was just grateful to be alive. Sarah, after years of running, was finally safe. She would have to start over, rebuild her life, But at least now, she had a chance. The last time Dr. Adam saw her, she was standing outside his clinic, a small bag slung over her shoulder. "You sure you don't want to stick around?" he asked. Sarah shook her head. "Too many memories here. I think I need a fresh start." He nodded in understanding. "Where will you go?" She smiled. "Someplace far from here." Dr. Adam reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Take this. In case you ever need help." She took it, her fingers brushing against his for a brief second. Then, with one last nod, she turned and walked away. As Dr. Adam watched her disappear into the distance, he couldn't help but think about how a simple appointment had changed everything. He had always believed in helping people. But sometimes, helping meant more than just fixing teeth. Sometimes, it meant